We have a fantastic lineup of speakers here for you tonight, and I'm going to introduce each one as they come up to speak. So first of all, we have Shen Batmaz. She's been a part of leading the really exciting strikes that we've seen at McDonald's over the past year.
Yeah, so I've been told I'm supposed to wear this shirt, but it's too hot to put over the shirt I've got, so I'm just going to hold it and show it to people. I'm sure you know. Yeah, I'll hang it there, so it's fine. So I'm Shen. I was one of the workers who went out on strike for the first Mc strike back in September last year. I was from the Crayford store, and now I work for the union as a community organiser. And I was really proud to help organise the second strike that happened on 1st of May with 5 stores across the country. So I'm just going to say really quickly why I chose to go on strike. So I was sick of seeing people I work with struggling on low wage. I was sick of seeing people I worked with becoming homeless. I was sick of seeing people going off shift crying because managers were bullying them, because customers were abusing them. And I think every single person that worked in my store and worked in the Cambridge store, Steve's up the back there, he's one of the strikers as well. I think every single one of us knew that if something was going to change, it was going to change because we stood up. It was going to change because we came together and because we fought back against this company, who is a multi-billion-dollar company. It has stores in almost every country in the world, and yet they can't afford to pay their workers a living wage. They can't afford to pay their workers enough that they're able to support their children, or they're able to be in stable housing. And this fight isn't just us in the UK. We may have been the first strike in Britain, but we are not the first to fight back against this company. This fight started in America, in New Zealand, in South America, in France, across the world, in the Philippines, South Korea, everywhere. It is an international movement. It's an international movement against an international company, because you have to fight it on all fronts. And our picket lines represented that. We had workers from all different countries. We had workers from all different backgrounds, all different ages on those picket lines, showing that it's not just the young who work in McDonald's. It's not just people biding their time until they find a better job. This is people's full-time jobs. This is jobs that they've had for 17 years and should be able to afford to live. And we have to be sure when we say to everyone that change never came from above. Bosses never willingly gave workers more money. They never willingly gave workers respect and safe conditions at work. It was always from the workers from below, pushing up to make sure that everyone who worked and went into work was able to afford to live, was able to go to work without being scared of being burnt, or without being scared of having an injury, without being scared of bullying from managers. This is how things change. That wasn't me pausing for applause, by the way. That was me losing my place in the speech. And we know that we have the opportunity to change things right now. We do. Right now is the time when we can get up and change things, especially people who are in a position like me, whose parents were well off enough that they got to go on holidays, they got to own homes, they had a better time because they had more representation, our unions were bigger, they were stronger. My generation doesn't have that, and they're angry, and I refuse to sit and wait for one man in the Labour Party to change it for us. I refuse to be told that we can't change it ourselves. And all props to Jeremy Corbyn, who came to the Bakers' conference, to the Bakers' Union conference, and said to us, do not wait for me. Go out and change it yourselves. So that's what we're doing. McDonald's and McStrike is not just about people in those McDonald's stores. This is a guerrilla war. This is us standing up against global corporations that run this world. It is again. Stand up with us. Stand up against the companies who don't care about you. Stand up against the Tory government who would force you into poverty. Stand up with us. Fight with us. Come out on the streets. Come out on strike. Make sure that we are changing things for our future, and make sure that everyone has a place in this world to live, has enough money to live, and actually has a good time in life. I don't know what I'm saying now. I'm sorry. That was a bad ending. Basically. Yeah. So stand up. That's fine. And one last thing. If you're a fast food worker in this room, we are organising in Burger King, we are organising in KFC, in Pizza Hut, in Pizza Express, in everywhere that we can, in Wetherspoons, we are standing up. So if you work anywhere like that, come and talk to us, get involved in the fight, start standing up and start changing things.
Okay, so one of the scandals over recent months has been the treatment of the Windrush generation. And our next speaker is Eleanor Peterson, who's part of the Windrush generation, and she's going to speak for us now about her recent experiences.
Good evening, everyone. I would say it's a pleasure to be here, but obviously it is to stand up for what's been happening. But as you know, my name is Eleanor, and I'm here as part of the Windrush generation. I was born in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, and I arrived in the UK in March of 1966 with my grandmother and sister. My mother was a nurse working in Leeds, where I also attended primary and secondary schools. In 2016, this is when the Windrush affected me, I went to renew my US passport, and the laws had changed, so I needed to show I had valid details with showing right to work. Now, I requested via email a resident information search to the Home Office. They replied back that nothing was found on me, which amazed me. As I've been here 52 years plus. Now, I've been unable to work since that period due to the fact with no stamp. After seeking legal advice, a friend suggested a solicitor who dealt with immigration issues for me. After a consultation, he reviewed my case and he said he could help, and a friend agreed to loan me the money to pay to cover the costs involved. I was already internally and emotionally drained at a low, of course, feelings of depression, anxiety, despair, the whole process, not getting a great result back from the solicitor didn't help. He got me back what's called an LTR, which is a leave to remain. It entitled me to no public funds, which means I had no access of any benefits. So I had to pay full rent, council tax, and the only thing I had was job seekers, which I was allowed because they were able to assess that I'd paid enough income tax and paid into my national insurance. So that's all the income I had, thank God. Otherwise, I would have had nothing. It would have been even more desperate. My friend, because of my faith, I knew God would keep me strong in believing I would be vindicated because I knew this was an injustice. My friend Janet, who works at the local library of mine, took me to an Islington Stand Up for Racism group chaired by Nikki, where Rupa was speaking on her work supporting Windrush victims. She's a lawyer at the law centre she works with. Now, David Rosenberg, also a member of Islington Stand Up to Racism, introduced me to Jeremy Corbyn, which was a great time, I have to admit, because firstly, I was annoyed with him because I thought he had not accepted a letter that I'd sent a month prior. It turned out the Royal Mail had lost that mail. So I had to apologise firstly, because I know he's always been a great vindicator of injustices. And so I apologized to him, gave him my letter of what I'd written, and also he was really, really helpful. He he's been a supporter for me. He's actually written internally to assist at the Visa and Home Office to help me. So bless him, he's been a great support. And he's been in communication via writing as well to keep me informed of what's happening, which is good. Within 4 weeks, since my meeting and the support of the group, I have an indefinite leave to remain now, okay? And the feeling that's given me is validation of what I already knew I was entitled to. But to see it in a plastic disc, it was worth it, because the humiliation I had to go previously to apply for that, I had to go into a post office and in a little booth to get my fingerprints done. The humiliation of that was not pleasant. In a public post office, I had a nightmare. So as I said, the Home Office that I went to in Birmingham treated me respectfully. They apologized themselves for me having to go through the whole process, when they can see from the documents that I presented that everything was, why are you here, sort of thing. So I'm grateful as well for that validation. For me, Rupa has actually completed my passport application as well. So again, I'm almost there to being considered a British subject. To me, it's a journey that I shouldn't have had to go through, but there are a lot more people in worse situation than myself. I'm grateful that I was not one that was, threatened with various other, horrible things. But Rupa, as I said, has won me the victory. God has won me my vindication. I have had the most amazing journey in the last 4 weeks. Since being associated with the group, as I said, I have had not only, as I said, my indefinite leave to remain, I've also went for a job interview last Thursday, okay, because I was able to, because I had identification, and on the Friday, it was confirmed that I have the job. So, yes. Okay. So just to confirm, great, I'm starting on the 23rd of that, so I'm really, really happy. What I need to say very quickly, because my time is coming short, this generation came here to help to rebuild the country after World War II. And despite the treatment they encountered, they persevered to offer their needed services in our NHS and transport. They wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the sweat of the Windrush workers and their resilience to do any job necessary to help boost the economical growth of this country. Theresa May's government needs to be held accountable, because their concepts to implement such a hostile program towards migrants, they set off this time bomb. And those who didn't agree even with their policy never challenged it, even on a humanitarian level. That is wrong. The government's actions have been a disgrace and a pure violation of civil rights and liberties. The Windrush generation's reward was to be treated with distasteful actions of deportation, forceful removals from homes and workplaces, being totally humiliated, families torn apart. That was the thanks given to their descendants. This we need, and we are in a place to actually stand up and say, this needs to be rectified. This is totally wrong.
Okay, next up we have Shiva, Hennessy and Mary Smith, who have come here to speak for us tonight from the really inspiring Appeal the 8th abortion rights campaign in Ireland.
I'm about to speak. It's the effect we have. Yeah. Not the first person I've made cry in the last few months. On May 25th, we had a huge political victory in Ireland. 66% of the population voted to repeal the Eighth Amendment, effectively legalising abortion, which had been almost completely banned, with an attached penalty of up to 14 years in prison. Our victory was a huge blow to the control of women's bodies that has characterised the Irish state since its foundations. But quickly before I get into repeal, well, I'm not sure how quick it'll be, but I'm going to try and attempt to give you guys a brief history of the changing lives of Irish women using the personal stories of my own grandmother, my mother, and myself. Whilst ours are by no means the most extreme cases, I hope it might bring to life the real significance of the repeal victory. My grandmother was born in 1916, the year of Ireland's revolution, marked by a proclamation that addressed both men and Irish women, which for the day was a huge advance. She lived through the War of Independence, the Civil War, and the subsequent counter-revolution, which rolled back on the progressive ideas of Connolly's revolution. She lived through the founding of the Irish Free State, culminating in the 1937 Irish Constitution, written by Eamon de Valera with the help of Archbishop Charles McQuaid, famous woman hater. The Constitution decreed Ireland was a Catholic country and that a woman's place was in the home. In many ways, my grandmother is a perfect example of both the material oppression of women and the success of the state experiment in using Catholic ethos as its ideological wing. She was a teacher. She had to give up her job when she married my grandfather, and she went on to have 10 children. I know. By all... and they're not even that nice. Especially the men. And we'll get to that in a minute. By all accounts, my grandmother had a difficult life. As primary caregiver, making resources stretch. She and my grandfather were also devoted members of the Catholic Church, and they encouraged this in their own children. My mother was born in 1953, the youngest of only 3 girls in this family of 10. While the boys had girlfriends, snuck out to parties, and played traditional music in pubs, the girls rarely had a chance to be heard, much less respected. In wider Irish society, appalling violations of women abounded. This was the era of the Magdalene laundries, forced adoption, and the extreme punishment of any woman displaying signs of sexuality. You see, while Irish men had sex, Irish women were expected to be virgins. Figure that one out for yourselves. I was born in 1988, 5 years after the Eighth Amendment was inserted into the Irish Constitution, asserting the equal right to life of the unborn with that of the mother. Like most babies, I was blissfully unaware of my own second-class status. It would take several years for the realisation to sink in, perhaps in part because, as a middle-class girl, I had a buffer against some of the sharper inequalities that come with being a woman and poor in Catholic Ireland. As kids, my friends and I pretty much all accepted that abortion was murder. It was what we'd been told, and even when my mother was explaining what sex was, she suggested I wait till I get married. I even thought I might at that time. Later in our teens, we sometimes discussed abortion in hushed tones, and how somebody knew a girl who had to get an abortion. Poor girl, she'll never recover. Pity she had to be such a slut. By this point, the idea of waiting till marriage to have sex was out the window, but we still held on to a certain moralism, clearly, around our bodies and sexuality. My moral ambiguity around abortion cleared up very quickly, however, one rainy, wintry night in January 2013, when I took a pregnancy test and found it was positive. Calling my sister in a panic, I knew then with clarity that abortion was something I could and would do. But this was Ireland. It became clear that I would have to do it in relative secrecy and without the support of my family, well, apart from my brilliant sister. The death of Savita Halappanavar 1 year before in an Irish hospital had triggered an outcry, and abortion was in the news. But still, people were not talking about their own abortions. I was so grateful to the few accounts I could find from women who said unapologetically that they'd had abortions and didn't regret them. I went to England and had an abortion. Imagine my surprise when afterwards I felt fine. But I'd been told that this would damage me for life. What was that about? A few years later, I started to read feminist and political texts, and it was only then that I saw the restriction of women's reproductive systems for what it really was: a structural and ideological weapon to keep women, particularly working-class women, under control. The importance of the fight for abortion rights came into sharp focus then. Around me too, the fight was ramping up in Irish society. In 2013, when I had my abortion, 2,500 people turned out to March for Choice in Dublin. In 2017, that number was 40,000. Where I had struggled 5 years previously to find first-hand accounts, by 2018, many women were telling their stories publicly. There were plays, books, poems, short films, comedy shows, exhibitions, you name it. Young women were mobilising in their tens of thousands. And when we finally got a referendum, we were ready. Of course, some of my comrades have been ready for 35 years, because just as the history of the state is a litany of horrors visited on its women, so too is it a history of the mighty struggle of the women who fought valiantly against it. And I want to pay tribute to people like Mary, Marnie, Breed, and the many others who paved the way for this generation's win. Sorry. My grandmother, who is still alive, 101 years of age, voted no in the referendum. She is a child of De Valera's Ireland. My mother, however, voted yes. Turns out having a raging feminist in the family takes its toll. But a particularly memorable moment for me came when the results of the exit poll came in at 11 p.m, an hour after the polling stations closed. The result was a landslide victory. My phone pinged. It was a text from my sister. Congratulations, it read. You've come a long way from that dark, rainy night in January 2013. We have come a long way. We've come a long way from dark Ireland. Thank you.
You've heard Shiva tell her story, and we know from surveys that women telling their stories had a huge impact on the campaign. But we also know as socialists that it was the mass movement on the streets that opened the space in which these stories could be told. I just want to clarify a bit about some of the terminology you might have heard about the campaign. First of all, repeal. What was that about? In 1983, they inserted an amendment into the Irish Constitution which basically gave the egg or the fetus the same status in law as the mother, as the woman. This copper-fastened any attempt at liberalising abortion laws since. The Together for Yes campaign you may have heard of, this was the official name of the official campaign. The yes bit being the way you had to vote to obviously get rid of the hated referendum. Now, as Shiva said, the scale of the victory was massive. It was a landslide, 2-1, 75% in Dublin voting for repeal. But the margin of the victory surprised us, and the joy was boundless. It was also a victory that we were able to take our ownership of, if you like. Who was the we? Well, the we were the campaigners. The we were the ones who, crucially, the canvassers who are out day and night, knocking on doors and making very hard arguments in a country like Ireland, possibly in a country anywhere, abortion being the subject that it is and eliciting the emotions that it does. the experience of the canvassing, though, and I wish I could had time to tell you more about it, I would encourage you, here's a shameless plug, to read the Irish Marxist Review, and also to go to Breed Smith's meeting on Saturday. Breed Smith is our People Before Profit TD, and my skin and blister, I hasten to add. But the actual canvassing was just extraordinary. I was one of the coordinators for canvassing in one of the constituencies, one of the areas in Dublin. And the canvassers were turning out first in their 1s and 2s, then in their 5s and 10s, and later on, literally in their 100s. They were mini armies all over the place. And it was tough. I mean, these were mostly young women, most of them working, who were coming straight after work, no time for your tea. They were straight out on the campaign trail, beating the pads for another 2 to 3 hours, and then going home and coming out and doing the same thing night after night. Mostly young, mostly enthusiastic, well, all enthusiastic, but incredibly courageous. And I have to commend them. I have to commend in particular people down the country who, unlike the cities, were very often confined to manning stalls, or personing stalls, I should perhaps say, in small towns and villages. And the bigots in those places vilified them. Already? Really? Okay, sorry, I'll move along. I have to say, too, that one of the amazing things about the campaign was that it blows out of the water the notion that progress is something that happens in a gradual way. You get on the elevator of history, and eventually, if you're from a backward country, you get up there to the mentor nations at a place that's appropriate for a progressive country. Actually, what happened in Ireland blew that out of the water. We came from the dark place that Shiva described, the horrors of the Magdalene laundries and the mother and baby homes, where they sold the babies and the mothers, where they imprisoned them, enslaved them, the horrors of child sex abuse. All of that was blown away when we leapfrogged in history and went much further than many of the countries that we were encouraged to emulate. Imagine a 2-to-1 vote in states in America for abortion rights, or in Eastern European states. So we take great courage from the fact that we know there's an international recognition, there's a resonance for that, and we hope that our sisters and our comrades fighting for these issues all around the world will take heart from our victory. Thank you. I just want to say that I'm very proud, too, of the role that People Before Profit played in this. I mean, we were up against a biased media who marginalised the left when opportunist politicians jumped on the bandwagon. We were up against a vicious no campaign, hugely funded by the fundamentalist Christian right in America, filthy posters, and thousands of them all over the place. One example. In the UK, 1 in 5 babies are murdered. Don't bring this culture to Ireland. Vote no, quote unquote. And the pictures were even worse. The role that People Before Profit played in countering that, in stiffening the resistance of the canvassers on the ground, in making sure that choice was heard, that a women's right to choose was the slogan that won people. 84% of those who voted yes said that was the reason that they did so, because they wanted women to have the right to choose. And this, strangely, was not the official language of the official campaign. Choice was a bit too radical. You might frighten the horses. People Before Profit were up there. Our slogans, our posters were trust women, our bodies, our choice. Last thing I'll say, I'm sorry to be so rushed. The very last thing. Nina Simone sings, I wish that I knew how it felt to be free. You know, in our victory, we glimpse that. And I tell you what, the taste is sweet. Wasn't it? It was sweet.
All right, our next speaker is Latifa. I'm going to get this right. Latifa Abouchakra. She's a Palestinian teacher, a member of the National Education Union here in the UK, and also an anti-racist activist. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Aren't we impressed with her? She can talk in Arabic. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of the Most High, may peace and blessings be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum. I begin with the name of God, because my life comes from Him, and to Him I shall return. I begin in the name of the All-Merciful, because when I have acted from ignorance in the past, I know that He still loves me, that He does not hold grudges, and neither should we. We haven't been able to stop injustice in all its forms, and on occasion we've not been able to spot it or failed to act quickly enough. We must forgive ourselves this, but use the remorse to fuel our development and organize better. We need to use opportunities for growth, like this festival, to become better activists. We will do better. Now, I was a bit skeptical to be asked to speak at the Marxist Festival because from what I know, Karl Marx is opposed to religion. And looking at the manipulation of organized faith by some in the world's history, it's not hard to see why Karl Marx believed that it's the opiate of the masses. And one thing that I feel compelled to state, and the fact that I must is a problem in itself, that there isn't discrimination in Islam, but there is in the practice of those who use it. Marxists and Muslims may not be able to agree on everything. However, we are united on the desire to rid the world of injustice. And I know... And one thing I do know is that we agree that Islamophobia currently is at the spear end of racism. We've allowed an environment of hate to fester. We're allowing it amongst ourselves, in our workplaces, in our schools, and in our streets. And this doesn't come from the far right first. This comes from the top down, the government first. Racist policies like Prevent, cutting funding from estates like Grenfell that are populated by working-class immigrant families, but leaving ample for other extraordinary, extravagant refurbishments in the same borough. These are only a few clear signs that a good quality of life matters only for the few and not the many. I remember first realizing this in 2006 when Jack Straw, long-term Labour MP and former Home Secretary, challenged a niqabi-wearing constituent. For those of you who are unaware, it's the veil. A niqabi-wearing constituent who came to him for assistance by asking her to remove the veil because he felt uncomfortable. Because he felt uncomfortable that he didn't know who he was talking to. Poor bloke, how does he cope with emails? And for a guy with misogynistic tendencies to say this is one thing, but one thing that I remember was where were the feminists challenging this pathetic remark at the time? I was 16 years old when this happened. And I felt that one day that could be me. I could be challenged about my practice at a job interview or at a hospital or in somewhere else in the public sector, in McDonald's. I don't know if you've seen that video. The deafening silence in challenging this is the reason why the decolonial argument put forward by Ramon Grosfigure makes sense, that racism, and currently Islamophobia, is the overarching aspect of discrimination and explains the current environment for hate, for Muslims in particular and other minorities by extension, as identified by IHRC research. And what kind of a teacher would I be if I didn't mention Prevent? And I'm going to go into a bit of detail for you today. Those of you who are unaware, stripped back to its bare bones, Prevent is based on a conveyor belt theory. It identifies 3 stages that lead to acts of terrorism. The first being extremism, having staunch, unwavering views, a bit like us. So these extremist views will lead the person to radicalization, meaning that their peaceful views will change so fundamentally that they're going to be led to stage 3, which is acts of violence. Now, Prevent is based on the idea that if we interrupt this process, we can prevent terrorist violence. How? By being Big Brother, by increasing surveillance on each other, breaching privacy policy, and reporting the could-be signs of radicalization, which are outward changes of behavior. For example, growing a beard, wearing a hijab, mood swings, changes of friendship groups. What teenager doesn't go through that? And that's the danger. It impacts everyone. Or does it? We wouldn't notice the average Joe isolating himself, but you would for the average Mo. Because minorities are a racialized subject. We are seen through the filter of race. We are categorized, first and foremost, as that. It is our main identity. If a white person coughs on the train, it's a cough. If I do it, I'm signaling Brother Crow from Four Lions to attack. Now, that was a good one, I'll let you laugh. Once we create this environment of hate, everybody suffers. The first person who was killed as a retaliation after the 9/11 attack was a Sikh. Islamophobia targets Muslims in particular, but it affects everybody. It's rampant. It exists in the white structures of power that oppress color, and the flavor of the decade is Muslims. This book was written, there's a really amazing book that I encourage you all to read. It's called The Environment of Hate, a New Norm for Muslims. And it's written by a really amazing hijabi called Arzu Marali and brother Syed Reza Amali. It discusses that prevent is a strategy to shut down debate, which is a branch of freedom. Why listen to these people? They're already different and suspicious. You should all know about this 4-year-old kid. He drew a picture for his class, and he showed the nursery staff. And he said, my daddy is holding a cooker bomb. This child got referred to prevent because he couldn't pronounce cucumber. Another 10-year-old who was describing the kind of house that he lived in, he said that he lived in a terrorist house. He meant to say he lived in a terrorist house. The point that I am making, and I'm going to say it extra loud, these people, if these people came from white background, white heritage, these mistakes would have been quickly spotted and laughed at. Prevent is a racist policy. When we refer to children... Thank you, absolutely. When we refer children to things like prevent, we are emboldening far-right groups to attack because we're actively showing the system in place that is there supposed to be in place for us to protect us is actually bullying us. And so the far-right think we're fair game. As a steward at the Jerusalem March and Rally, which is an annual event, I saw at firsthand how aggressive the far-right are. And answer me this, how do 15,000 people come together in one place at one time with the intention of hurting people like me, knowing there's going to be armored police there, still not care? If there wasn't something in the structures of power telling them that this was okay. It's there. Now, we are powerful in our influence, and we have a duty to ourselves and to the young people in our society to make them positive global citizens, but not through promoting what we call British values. British values are mislabeled. They are universal, they are international. We should call them human values. Why are our politicians choosing to alienate groups of people who may not identify as British? There are people who live, work, and contribute to our society, but are not British in their nationality or culture. What about them? This monopolization of universal values is imperialistic, and it reminds me of how the British ruling class decided one day to call themselves Great Britain, and everyone just went along with it. What's funny is that the idea of Britishness isn't itself defined by the indigenous people. The average Joe doesn't define these things, and he certainly doesn't relate to them. I'm going to be a little bit stereotypical in my next comment, but I know this is closer to the truth than what's being peddled by the media. The average Joe wants to go home on a Friday night, probably to the pub, and talk about how amazing Mo Salah is. The white working class are also victims of the elites of this country, and they are also oppressed. But to the white working class, the narrative is spun. They're told that the reason that they're short of money is because the immigrants and the Muslims are here, where the issue actually is the white working class, the Muslims, and the immigrants are all victims of the same elite white establishment. Now, this narrative is being spun. They're trying to push this racist narrative onto us, and this definition is being forced from the top down in order to instrumentalize it to oppress. We've seen it before, 100 years ago, with a man called Lord Kramer. He was a respected politician of the time, with international influence, and he opposed the suffragette movement in the UK, but was promoting Muslim women's rights in Egypt. This promotion was instrumentalized to create division in Egyptian society, to further the colonial agenda while oppressing the movement in the UK. And guess what? It's still happening. Theresa May is today's Lord Kramer. She offers aid to oppressors like Israel while cutting funding from our schools and our hospitals. But that did deserve a clap, but I'm on my time. I need to quickly do this. But it is okay, because she agrees with us. She's recently said, religious discrimination blights the lives of millions of people across the globe and leads to conflict and instability, both here and abroad. Individuals are being denied the basic right of being able to practice their faith free of fear. But we will not let these policies divide us. I want to end on saying we genuinely must use opportunities like this festival to be better activists. We will be better. Assalamu alaikum.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Latifa. Okay, next up we have Dave McNamara. He's an NHS worker from Wigan, where he's been on strike, fighting against privatisation and outsourcing in the NHS. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really honoured that I'm able to be here and speak to you all. So, in short, the decision has been made by Wigan, Wrightington and Lee NHS Foundation Trust to force nearly 1,000 workers into a subsidiary company, which that takes us out of the NHS. That is the biggest insult of all on this year of every year, the 70th anniversary of the NHS. And this is the year that Andrew Foster, our chief exec, decides to do this. It is incredible. So, in response, we decided to have a ballot. And from this ballot, we had an overwhelming 73% turnout and 93% in favour of strike. Because when you betray workers in this fashion, you really stir up the hornet's nest. The WWL support staff, we've gone out now for 9 days, and we have another 7 days to come. Now, during the industrial action, our chief exec, Andrew Foster, has taken advantage of restricted use internal email systems to spread false allegations of behaviour of striking individuals. He's also been in touch with the media to make similar claims that we've sabotaged the hospital while we've been outside on the picket lines. Get your head around that? I can't. Now, the attitude of the staff has been absolutely incredible. I have never seen anything like this in Wigan. They are stalwart in their resistance. They've chosen to withdraw their labour as part of the most important industrial action in NHS history, as far as I'm concerned. We are the front line against privatisation in the NHS. Now, the worst part of all of this, for me, is that they've targeted the lowest paid people in our trust, the lowest paid. And we've had to rely now on donations from the public to our strike fund so we can actually still maintain this action. Otherwise, we wouldn't be getting anywhere. Now, the trade unions have been absolutely superb with us. Members of the public, brilliant support, absolutely brilliant. Local MPs, we've got all the local MPs on our side. There is nobody who supports this move at all, apart from the chief executive and his board of directors. It just makes no sense to me at all. It absolutely makes no sense how they can do this to us. I mean, it's a matter of pride. It's not even about our money. It's not about our pay. Our terms and conditions are under threat, and you know that's a real problem. But the pride, you don't take away someone's pride. That's why NHS workers work in the NHS. None of us, or a lot of us, would not do that job if it wasn't for the NHS. So, people in Wigan, you know, we remember the heritage of the miners and the strikes that happened there. We're not going to have that. We're not going to have that history anymore. We're going to change the legacy of Wigan with this action forever. I've lost where I'm up to now. Pardon? Probably more of the same. No. It's... I don't normally get lost of words, to be honest with you, but this whole idea, it's a mockery of the NHS. Now, it's obviously it's not just happening in Wigan, it's happening all over the country. It's an infection. It's an infection that needs to be fought. It needs to be fought. As you rightly said before, we have a war on here. Now, Wigan, we're in a big battle at the moment. This is kind of Stalingrad for Wigan. But this is a war. It is a war, and we have to stand up and do something about it. We need to stop this before it catches on any further. No, I think I'm going to leave it at that, actually. I don't really have any more to say. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Moira Saml to speak for us. She's obviously, her reputation precedes her. She's a spokesperson from the Justice for Grenfell campaign and a member of the Socialist Workers Party in West London.
A year ago, I stood here shocked, traumatized, intensely angry on what I'd witnessed on the 14th of June. And I must say, year on, it's been a hard fight. I'd be lying if I didn't say a lot of us are incredibly battle-weary. The North Kensington community has not just lost 72 women, men and children, but for a year we had to hold on to our grief. We had to hold on to our grief, and we had to fight publicly while holding on to that grief. But I tell you what, the North Kensington community, the Grenfell community, have turned into warriors. We've had to fight a local council that has been ineffective, corrupt, and what we call institutionally indifferent to the needs of the North Kensington community, and especially to the Grenfell residents. We've had to fight central government, and I mean, none of these fights are at the end. We haven't won any of these yet. They're still ongoing. We've had to fight central government. Most people know that there was a fight for a diverse panel on the public inquiry. People probably know the history of how that was fought. A petition was put forward by the bereaved families for a diverse panel. Lots of people actually didn't understand why we wanted a diverse panel. And we said it's not just about the fact that when Morbik arrived in the community with his panel, that a lot of us looked at the panel and said, sorry, you don't look like us. You don't sound like us. Have you even lived in a tower block or visited a tower block? What the call for a diverse panel was about people who understood our lived experience. They didn't have to look like us, but they needed to understand what it was like to live in a working class community and to be subjected to what the residents of Grenfell were subjected to. The bereaved families put in a petition, and Theresa May, it was in a gift to give it, refused it. Justice for Grenfell put forward the billboards campaign, where we rode billboards around London, using the 3 Billboards film, saying 72 have died, there'd be no arrests, how come? That raised the number on the petitions. But it was, of course, Stormzy who called the Prime Minister out at the Brits, which brought it up to the 100,000, so that actually a debate happened, and there is now a diverse panel. We've also had a huge fight around housing, and in particular to house the survivors and displaced families. You know, at the moment, there are still 50 out of the 127 families who are living in emergency housing, and that means many of them are still 13 months on in hotels. So that fight also continues. Shame. We have had also to educate ourselves on a whole range of matters: building regulations, cladding, health and safety. And, you know, many of the community, we've stepped up to the mark, having to do endless reading and finding out about this. Because as we know, the Hackett report still hasn't banned cladding. And there still are almost 300 tower blocks across the country where people are living in fear that actually there'll be another Grenfell. There's a South African expression called Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. And that is what the Grenfell community, that is what the North Kensington community demonstrated in the aftermath of the 14th of June. We came together united. Wasn't easy, but we came together united. But we came together with the support of the working class right across London and right across the country. And I'll tell you what, we'd never have done it without that support. And that support meant that on the 14th of June this year, a year after, where many of us felt able to grieve, on the silent walks that we had organized every month, every 14th of every month, that there were 16 silent walks or vigils right across the country. I believe there were silent walks or vigils in America, in Australia, but also the fact that 10,000 people turned up to the silent walk in North Kensington, which was a real show of actual solidarity and the fact that actually Grenfell has moved the country en masse, actually. Grenfell holds a mirror, I think, to our society. I think Grenfell really demonstrates the kind of society we are living in at the moment. And I think that now is not the time for any of us to avert our gaze. It particularly holds a mirror up to the fact that actually we've experienced cuts and austerity. It holds a mirror up to the fact that actually there's been systematic racist attitudes towards the Muslim community, and there's been, as we've heard, a hostile environment towards immigrants. And all of that has impacted on the Grenfell community, and in particular, the residents of Grenfell. We've also seen the attacks on council housing and the attitudes to council housing, and that has really impacted on what happened at Grenfell. The fact that actually the residents of the tower made all these complaints and they were ignored. Because, you know, why are we interested in social housing tenants? We're only interested, actually, as councils, we've seen it right across London, of actually, not we, but the council, of gentrification, of social cleansing, and so we've seen all of that, which has resulted in Grenfell. Okay. So all the while we've been fighting all of this, and at the same time working in unity with support, we've also had to keep our eye, now that the public inquiry is opened, on what exactly and where the blame has been apportioned. Because we know, as I'm sure lots of you know, actually who is responsible for what happened at Grenfell. But all the while, there is this shifting of blame going on. So we saw the unedifying spectacle of where they tried to blame individual firefighters who actually went into the burning building to try and save lives. And somehow were put into the dock as if they were responsible and to blame for what happened on the night. Look, we know who's responsible. You know, as somebody said, the cladding was equivalent to 30,000 litres of petrol. Why would you put that on a building where people lived? So I think it's clear for us, after a year, that actually, if we want to blame anyone, it is capitalism that we need to blame. It is a neoliberal system that puts profit before people. Most of the Grenfell community are very, very clear about that. And that means that actually, if we're going to get justice for Grenfell, that we need a movement. We need the working class, both the trade unions, and the campaigners work very well with the unions because we need their support, and we need especially those unions in the public services to actually work together with us as residents. We need a change in culture around that, and we will only get justice for Grenfell, not through a public inquiry, I don't believe, but through a huge movement, because Grenfell affects all of us right across the country. And so what I'd like to ask everybody here and over the weekend is to join us in the fight for justice, because we're not going to get justice unless they feel, as somebody said, our hot breath on their necks. So justice for Grenfell.
Our final speaker then tonight is going to be an anti-racist activist, co-convener of Stand Up to Racism, and also a member of the Socialist Workers Party. Please welcome to the platform Weyman Bennett.
Comrades, I'm really proud and glad to be here. And I tell you why I'm proud and glad to be here. Because I think we're living through the most dangerous times that people have seen since the Second World War. And I give an example. Donald Trump is coming to this country, and we're going to build a beautiful wall. We're going to build a beautiful wall, and on our wall is going to be people that fight back against women's oppression, fight back against fascism, fight back against people that think that women are second-class citizens, against homophobia. We're going to build a wall of people that say that he's not welcome. And I want to say why. George Bush said, when he saw Donald Trump elected, that's some crazy bat-ass shit that he's just said. George Bush said that about Donald Trump. And what you have to realize about that in terms of living through unusual times, I've never seen a situation where you see children in cages and their parents crying, and it's on film. And then the wife of the president wears a coat that says, "I don't care," on the back of it. That's not an accident. It is not an accident about what happens in Grenfell. This is not an accident. And when people say who matters and who's the leader of the free world, they tell us that's the person who we've got to listen to, who turns around and says this. When fascists march, he turns around and says some of those people are good people. He goes further than that. He tweets Britain first. And then they say he's made a mistake. He's not made a mistake. Steve Bannon is his advisor. They know what they're doing. They say outrageous things. They are normalizing the unnormalizable, something that shouldn't have happened since the Second World War. We have to understand that the position that we're in is that the other reason why we should hate him is a billionaire. But one of the reasons why he's there is because he presents himself as being against the establishment. We shouldn't forget this. He presented himself as being against the establishment. He's a racist. He was a racist since 1989. They say he's just discovered it. He was the first person to take out an advert inside the New York Times against a group of black and Hispanic people saying that they were guilty, even though the court said they weren't. He represents this. He says he wants to grab women. I'd like to grab him by the throat, actually. That's the truth. I'd like to grab him by the throat. And we have to grab him by the throat. It took ages to put together a coalition. The grassy knoll is a solution that really comes to my head every time when I see that he comes here. I'm told that's an illegal thing to say, but I'm amongst friends. So the point is we have to look at somebody who's a climate denier. And part of the thing that we're trying to do now is to understand that what the kind of world we live in is that these people are put up forward as being normal, as being something that which you have to accept as part of the body politic. We also have to set something else as well. It's true that he's a racist, a sexist, bigot. He's a warmonger. Do you remember? He said he's a peacemonger. He went to North Korea. I tell you what happened, right? Two crazy people met each other. Kim Il-sung and he goes, I recognize something in you. You're a megalomaniac, a murderer, a crazy person too. We can make a deal, right? And the deal is, this is why it's crazy. The guy says, let's start a nuclear war. Maybe 30 million people will be killed. I sat down there and thought about it. He said it nationally. Now, if you say it normally nationally, people take you away, don't they? They put their arms around you, you're having a bad time. Do you mean? No, he's the president. And people say, respect the office. These are dangerous times. And these times that we cannot accept or take as being normal. And who invites him here? Who actually invites him here? I tell you, one of the things that is happening, he's given an open door to the far right and the populist right to actually build. People talk about anti-Semitism. You know who he attacked? George Soros. I tell you why they attacked George Soros. Yes, he's a billionaire. He shouldn't have a problem with billionaires. He attacked George Soros because he's Jewish. I believe that he attacked George Soros because he's Jewish. Anti-Semitism openly put. They said in Hungary they're going to open up. Who's his best friend? In Hungary. He's opened the door and they're passing a law. In other words, they're putting forward arguments that haven't been put forward. I don't believe this happened since the Holocaust. In Italy, they're taking Roma names and they're registering them as an ethnic group. You know when the last time that was done? When a man called Mussolini was inside power. So when people say to me, you're exaggerating the situation. Since when have you seen a situation where all across Europe, you see Marine Le Pen, you see inside Vienna, you see the rise of the so-called freedom parties and all these people. You see these people come to power. You see a ship full of refugees told to go away in Italy. And what does go away really mean? Go away means go away and drown and die. They talk about presenting detention centres where these are called, what are they called normally? They're called concentration camps. That's what they're talking about, building. Now they say to us we're exaggerating. We're not exaggerating. What we're talking about is a process in our world is getting worse and more dangerous, and it's led by people that deserve to be stopped. And that's why I want everybody to say that we're building on the 13th. We want to give Donald Trump a welcome that he'll never forget. And we shouldn't forget something else. Donald Trump is scared of the mass movement. Remember, he was supposed to come here before. And then he dropped his diary and he forgot. No, that's not what happened. We came out and opposed what he stood for. And who's actually invited him here? Theresa May. Remember that word? Strong and stable. Remember? Strong and stable Theresa. Do you mean? All you have to look at is what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. What's going to happen? They ask about the cabinet. Inside the cabinet, the most important thing about the cabinet is they hate each other. They hate each other. They don't know what to do. Boris Johnson turns around, and you know what he said over the question of Brexit? He said, fuck business. That's what he said, fuck business. Now, among socialists and anti-capitalists, that's what we think all the time. That's the truth. We say every day. You know, when a manager comes to us, if they sit down and say, we're doing negotiation, in our mind, we're thinking what Boris Johnson says. That's what's going on. That's what we think about management. That's what we think about these people, because they're responsible for the position that we're in. They keep telling us there's not enough money. I tell you what there is money for, Trident. Did you hear the defence minister defend it? He said, it's only going to cost 35 billion a year. 35 billion, we're just going to find it here, out of our back pocket. Every time you go to them, they say, what, for the NHS, there's no money, there's nothing, the coffers are empty, there's no pay increase. And then they find 35 billion, 350 billion. They've got the money. I tell you what it is, they don't care about us. If you don't understand that, they don't care about us. And why are we here? And when we hear this question of British values, they're going to treat people equally. Mozambique spoke here last year. And what did he learn about British values? Torture. MI5. James Bond wasn't drinking a martini when you took hold of him. He was torturing him. And I tell you something, Theresa May has only said one honest thing I've heard her say. She apologised for what happened. But the truth is, an apology is not good enough. If they're talking about human values, and this is what they represent the worst elements in terms of what's taking place in our society. Since 2008, in this country, they have handed over £70 billion worth of tax cuts to the rich. And when people talk about where's the money gone, that's where the money's gone. And what they've used it to do is divide and rule. And I'll tell you one of the problems is, right, the person I want to challenge against this, I support Jeremy Corbyn. I call him a friend. I support Diane Abbott. I call them friends. I stand with them against those other people. But I'll tell you this now, they have got their work cut out of them in terms of the people that we're fighting. The truth is, well, there's no time to wait. We haven't got time to wait. I'll tell you why we haven't got time to wait. Because you've got people like, I saw something take place on the 9th of June where 15,000 fascists went into the centre of London and rampaged. Actually, absolutely rampaged. They were doing it for so-called Tommy Robinson, and they said it was about freedom of speech. Let's be honest about what freedom of speech means to him. It means burning down mosques, as they did in their attempt to do inside Leeds. Freedom of speech is not freedom of speech. If somebody comes to you and says, I believe in freedom of speech, I'd say, yes, you believe in freedom of speech. If someone comes to you and says, I would like to organise a mass movement in order to organise mass murder against particular groups of people, if they're black, gay, socialist, trade unionists, whatever it is, I call that a threat. I call it a threat. And if somebody gives me a warning that I'm going to do it in 20 years' time, I don't wait. I fight you today. There's more of us than you. Let's do it today. And that's the reason why on the 14th, on the 14th of July, we have to be on the streets standing with, I'm glad that Len McCluskey supported what we did by calling inside a protest. I'm glad that 20,000 people have signed a petition to say that they can't march on the streets. That we stand as a majority against those people. But I'll tell you what really matters. The truth is, part of the reason why they've got away with those arguments, at first people think that they can't actually become a serious problem. And they can't, and actually I think there's a danger that when they start to come out, you know the danger is that people get fearful. There's a man called Spinoza, he said, don't cry, don't laugh, but act. And I think that's what we have to do today. All of us are the most important people in the world, and I mean that. I tell you, one of the biggest problems that the working class faces is Karl Marx said, the ruling ideas in any society are the ideas of the ruling class. And you know this, don't you? As soon as you argue about anything, people say you don't know what you're talking about. I was on the radio with a scumbag. This man's called Gerard Batten, right? Gerard Batten from UKIP. Do you know what he said? He said, there's problems in this country. I piped in, it's you. And then he said, no, I said, it's you. It's you, you're the problem, right? And he's going, do you understand then he said, do you understand what it means to be British? And I said to him, okay, explain to me this. Why did you invite somebody who supports the Waffen-SS to speak inside the central? How does this fit with your British kind of concept? Do you know what I mean? How does this work? And he was going, it's probably the left had provoked people, the reason why people were fighting. I'm the party of law and order. That's UKIP, confused, lies, do you know what I mean? And actually, part of their main argument is the question of Islamophobia. We have to be out in numbers on the 14th. We have to start a fight. It's true that you start a fight, you have to start somewhere. I remember the BNP starting with 1 million votes and being told, but Nick Griffin is unbreakable. And then I saw him crying and barking. And then I wanted to say, can I talk to him? I tell you who defeated him. It's true the working class, black, white, and we all defeated him. But I tell you what defeated him. Socialists at the heart of a struggle. If you want to build a struggle, if you want to build a pearl, do you know what you need? A bit of grit. You need a little bit of grit, and around it builds the pearl. And that's the reason why socialists are important. They have to have some kind of idea about how you fight back against inequality. And the way they're attacking us means that we have to make resistance. People often say, I know I'm running out of time, but people often say we don't have the power. Have you heard about the crumpet crisis? They say that CO2, we're running out of CO2, right? Because three plants, right, are not producing enough CO2. You know who produces CO2? The workers produce the CO2. 3 plants mean there's not going to be enough beer, there's not going to be enough chicken. And I thought about it. Think about all those chains of things. Who does that? We do it. Imagine if it wasn't a CO2 crisis, but it was a banking crisis. All of us came out and said we're going to resist. The question is, do people know their own power? And part of the half problem is you have to have a big memory to remember power. I remember being 8 or 9 years old, and there was a man called Edward Heath. Many of you won't remember him. He was a prime minister, so-called, of this country. And he came on TV. It's black and white TV. That's how old I am. And he came out on the TV, and he said, who runs the country? And as he said it, the lights went out and the telly went off. And I tell you what I thought. I hadn't read Capital. And I hadn't read the Communist Manifesto, but I knew it wasn't fucking him. It wasn't him. I said, it's the person who switched the lights out. That's who had the power. The problem is we don't switch the lights out enough. We don't feel our own power. We don't. But there has to be a memory and there has to be a struggle. And don't think that we will be defeated by what they say. I tell you, the most powerful weapon is the idea that you can't resist anything. The way they talk to you. When you go anywhere, the truth is, the first person, why is Boris Johnson so confident? Because he went to Eton. He went to Eton, he was told from the time. What he should have done is, every time we see him, we should say, you're an idiot. Because he is an idiot, right? But we're told that. We're told that we've got no choice. I tell you what Marxism is about. This is our Eton, this is our university, this is how we organise. This is where we get our confidence. But we don't do leadership from above. We do leaders. All of us are leaders. When you read about the resistance inside Chequers, you find out it's the name of a socialist or somebody organising it. When I was a kid and the National Front was attacking me, a teacher took round a petition because they were leaders. And the real question is, we need more leaders. I want Jeremy Corbyn as a leader. We have to join with thousands of others because there's more of us than there is of them. But I tell you, we do need a socialist leadership as well because there's a danger. And this is the danger. Every time we struggle, I remember a man called Hollande. He said he was going to solve the problems inside France. The problem is, he didn't. There's Cyprus. Do you know who he met with last week? He met with Theresa May. You know, he agreed with her to put gunboats around the seas of Greece to stop the refugees from coming. Such hope around Cyprus. And then actually, he meets with some people who are enemies. I don't expect this. I'm proud to work with Diane Abbott, who says she's going to shut down Yarlswood. I want to work with those people, but I tell you what those people need. They need an army of people outside who are not waiting, but struggling now. And I tell you why we need it. I'm sick of the racist attacks on Muslim women. I'm sick of the attacks that are taking place in our society, and socialists can lead it and change it. What Marxism is about is equipping us with the ability and the means to connect both the potential power of our class with the brains of how we fight. And that's what we need. So I'm going to shut on it. On the 13th, let's go out onto the streets. On the 14th, let's fight the Nazis. And the next day, let's build and fight for a society that's free from Nazis, racism, sexism, homophobia. And let's make sure that we work with Jeremy Corbyn, we fight with them, but what we also build is a socialist party, because what the type of society should we have when you see Nazis or people who are proud of what happened in the Holocaust? Our slogan is never again. Let's make sure that's a practice that affects us all.